Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time we're looking into something a little different, how we can use drones to monitor turf grass.
Okay.
So it's not just about like fancy golf courses. We're talking about, parks and fields, even your own backyard.
Yep.
And we're looking at a really cool research paper that came out in 2024 in the Drones Journal that gives us a kind of big picture look at all the latest and greatest findings in this field.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
Uh-huh.
It's relatively new, but it's really gained some traction, especially since about 2016.
Yeah.
And the paper points out there was actually a peak in interest in 2022.
Okay, so we're catching this like right at the right time, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really cool because usually when you think about drones, you're thinking about, getting a package delivered or seeing those really cool shots from the air.
Yeah,
But thinking about them in terms of managing turf grass is a whole new perspective for me.
you're right. It's kind of a new frontier. And the paper really dives into the specific types of drones that are being used. And you might be surprised to learn that a familiar name, DJI, is kind of dominating the research.
Oh, yeah.
They're featured in over 60% of the studies, and they're using mainly quadcopters and hexacopters.
Okay, so for our listeners who maybe aren't, drone experts, just a quick breakdown. Quadcopters have 4 rotors and hexacopters have 6. So these designs offer stability and maneuverability,
Right.
which I'm guessing is pretty key when you're trying to, get a good detailed look at the grass.
Precisely, the research really highlights the importance of a stable platform, especially when you're monitoring for something called hydric stress,
Oh,
which is basically how the grass is coping with a lack of water.
okay. Makes sense. So you need something that can hold steady and get those accurate readings.
Exactly.
Now, the paper did mention a couple of studies using fixed-wing drones, which I thought were more for covering, like, huge areas like mapping a forest or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. They're typically used for larger scale operations, and that's where it gets really interesting. Those studies that were using fixed-wing drones were looking at managing much larger areas of turf grass,
Oh, okay.
which kind of hints at the potential for drones to handle, these really vast expanses, city parks, sprawling estates, maybe even those massive farms that are growing turf for landscaping.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're not just talking about keeping your little backyard green. This could be a whole new way to manage these, massive green spaces.
Exactly. We're talking about a whole new scale of turf grass management. And it's not just about the drones themselves, it's about the data they can collect. And that's where the cameras come in.
Okay, so I'm assuming we're not talking about your typical, point and shoot camera here.
These are special cameras called multispectral cameras. They capture light beyond the visible spectrum,
Yeah.
revealing information about plant health and stress levels, even nutrient deficiencies that we can't see with the naked eye.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's like giving these drones X-ray vision for plants seeing beneath the surface to really understand what's going on.
That's a great way to put it. And it's really interesting to see the range of cameras being used in the research.
Mm-hmm.
The most popular choice seems to be mica sense, particularly their red edge models.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's also this kind of clever DIY approach
Oh, okay.
using modified RGB cameras, which shows that even on a budget, there's potential to get some really valuable insights.
I love that it's like democratizing this whole,
Yeah.
this whole technology.
Right.
But it's all well and good to have these drones flying around taking pictures, but what does it actually mean for managing turf grass? Like, what are the real world applications here?
Well, one of the biggest concerns in turf grass management, especially with growing water scarcity and rising costs, is watering effectively. And that's where drones are really starting to make a difference.
Okay, so instead of just, blindly watering everything, you can use these drones to pinpoint exactly which areas need it most.
Precisely, they can detect signs of that hydric stress that we talked about before it becomes visible to the naked eye. So you can have targeted irrigation that saves water and keeps the grass healthier.
Wow, okay, that's a huge benefit, especially, as we're looking at drier climates and thinking about water conservation.
It is.
But I'm guessing it's not just about water conservation. Are there other applications like with fertilizer and things like that?
Absolutely. Fertilizer is another area where drones are proving incredibly valuable by analyzing the data from those multispectral cameras. They can actually assess nutrient deficiencies in the soil and help tailor fertilizer applications to meet the specific needs of the turf grass.
Oh, okay, so it's like a customized nutrition
Yeah.
plan for your lawn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ensuring that it's getting exactly what it needs without any waste.
Wow, that's really cool.
And that benefits not only the health of the turf grass, but also minimizes the environmental impact of fertilizer runoff.
So far, we've really focused on water and nutrients, but I'm guessing these drones have a few more tricks up their sleeves. What other applications are researchers looking into?
The research highlighted a wide range of emerging applications, from weed detection to monitoring for diseases and pests, even analyzing the effects of things like temperature and herbicides.
Wow, so they're really giving turfgrass managers a whole new toolkit to work with.
Exactly, and it's only getting more sophisticated.
But I'm curious, what about the turf grass itself? Are we talking about one specific type of grass here, or are there variations?
That's a great question, and it actually highlights a key area where more research is needed. Most of the studies have focused on sports lawns, those carefully manicured playing fields you see in stadiums and golf courses.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. They're high profile. They need to be, perfectly maintained.
Right. But what's fascinating is that gardening lawns, the kind that most of us have in our backyards, are comparatively understudied,
Oh, interesting.
even though they represent a much larger percentage of global turf grass.
So there's a big gap in our understanding of how this technology can be applied to the everyday lawns that most people are actually interacting with.
Exactly. And another area that needs more attention is the type of grass within those lawns. Most of the research has focused on single species lawns, even though mixed species lawns, which are more common and ecologically diverse, are becoming increasingly popular.
So we're missing a big piece of the puzzle if we're only looking at those single species lawns. It's like studying, a single ingredient in a really complex recipe.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Mhm.
We need to understand how these different grass species interact, how they respond to various treatments, and how drones can be used to manage them effectively in a real-world setting. Yeah, it's like we're just starting to understand, the language of turf grass,
Okay.
and drones are giving us this whole new way to listen.
I like that. But I want to maybe zoom back in a little bit on some of the specifics. We talked about the potential of drones for monitoring that hydric stress.
Right.
What kind of details did the paper reveal about, what they found out about that?
Well, one of the interesting findings was that specific drone models seem to be preferred for different tasks. We were talking about those DJI quadcopters and hexacopters being popular.
Yeah.
Well, the paper specifically called out the S800 EVO and Matrix 200 models
Okay.
as being particularly favored for hydric stress monitoring.
Hmm. I wonder what makes those models, particularly well suited for that kind of monitoring.
It could be a combination of factors.
Hmm.
Perhaps their stability in flight or battery life,
Right.
maybe the ease of integrating them with the specific sensors that are used for detecting hydric stress. It's worth noting that the research didn't really explicitly say why
Right.
those preferences were there, but it definitely raises some interesting questions for further investigation.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like there's always like another layer to uncover.
Yeah.
What about the cameras that are used for that hydric stress monitoring? Were there any standouts there?
Well, as we've seen, multispectral cameras are really the go-to choice. And the MicaSense Red Edge models, particularly the MX and Ultim, were mentioned quite frequently.
Okay.
But one thing that I found really intriguing was that some researchers actually modified traditional RGB cameras for this purpose.
Oh, wow. So a little bit of ingenuity goes a long way.
Exactly. It shows that there are multiple pathways to gaining these insights,
Right.
even on a tighter budget.
But can you break down how these multispectral cameras, actually work? I mean, they sound pretty complex. How do they actually reveal information about that hydric stress?
Sure, so these special cameras, they capture wavelengths of light that are beyond what our eyes can see.
Okay.
It's like they're seeing this whole hidden world of information.
Right.
And when plants are stressed, they reflect different amounts of light in these invisible wavelengths, and the camera can pick up on those subtle changes.
Okay, so it's like plants are sending out these invisible signals, and these cameras are giving us the ability to understand them.
That's a great way to put it.
So what types of turf grass were they studying in these hydric stress experiments? I mean, was it all about those perfectly manicured sports lawns?
It was interesting. There was a good mix of grass types being studied.
Yeah.
The Lolium genus, which includes ryegrass, was the most common, followed by Poa, Stenotaphyrum, and Zoysia.
Okay.
These are all popular choices for lawns and sports fields because they're known for being pretty durable and adaptable to different climates.
Yeah, they're kind of the workhorses of the turf grass world,
Exactly.
able to handle a lot of, foot traffic and varying weather conditions. But did they look at both single species and mixed species lawns?
That's a crucial point. And unfortunately, over half of the studies, about 52%, focus solely on single-species lawns,
Oh, okay.
which again reinforces the need for more research on these mixed species ecosystems, which, as we discussed earlier, are much more common in real-world settings and offer a greater level of biodiversity.
Yeah, it's about, bridging that gap between those controlled research environments and, the complexities of the real world. But were there any studies that did look at mixed species lawns in relation to hydric stress?
There were a smaller percentage focused on mixed species lawns, with combinations like Cynodon, Zoysia, Stenotaphrem, Lolium, and Poa being the most common.
Okay.
So these findings do offer some valuable insights into how those different species interact and how those varying water needs can be managed.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how they might, respond to water stress in different ways.
It is.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about fertilizer. The paper mentioned that monitoring fertilizer application is another major application for these drones.
Right.
What did they find out in that area of research?
Well, one of the key takeaways was that while monitoring fertilizer is definitely a major focus, the use of biostimulants in turfgrass management is still relatively unexplored,
Oh, interesting.
even though they're becoming increasingly popular in sustainable lawn care practices.
And biostimulants, for those who might not know, those are substances that can enhance plant growth and health in a more natural way, kind of like a more environmentally friendly alternative to traditional fertilizers.
Right, and there's a real opportunity for research to catch up to practice in this area.
Yeah.
Drones could play a significant role in understanding how biostimulants affect different grass species and how to optimize their application.
Okay, so lots of potential there for drones to kind of drive that innovation in sustainable lawn care.
Absolutely.
What about the drones themselves? I mean, were they using the same types for fertilizer monitoring as they were for that hydric stress monitoring?
There was some overlap, but also some variations. DJI drones remained the most common, appearing in over 75% of the studies.
Wow, they're really everywhere.
They are, but the specific models varied. The S900 and Phantom 4 models were particularly popular for fertilizer monitoring.
It makes you wonder if certain designs are better suited for specific tasks.
That's a great point.
Maybe those models offer certain features or capabilities that make them more effective for that application.
Right, and in terms of cameras, multispectral cameras continued to dominate. But as we saw with hydric stress, some researchers did opt for those modified traditional RGB cameras.
So that spirit of resourcefulness is kind of present in all areas of this research.
It is.
What about the types of lawns they were looking at for fertilizer application? I mean, was it mostly sports fields again, or did they broaden the scope to include more, those gardening lawns?
This time, it was a bit of a mixed bag, unlike the hydric stress research, which heavily favored sports lawns. The fertilizer studies were more evenly split between sports lawns and gardening lawns, with a slight edge toward gardening lawns.
Oh, okay. So maybe we're starting to see a shift in focus expanding beyond those high-profile sports fields to consider those everyday lawns.
It's a promising trend, but here's the catch. The majority of the studies, about 67%, didn't actually specify what type of lawn they were monitoring.
Oh, that's frustrating. It's like getting a recipe with some of the ingredients missing.
Right.
Without knowing the specifics of the lawn being studied, it's hard to draw any, meaningful conclusions.
It's exactly. It really underscores the need for more detailed reporting and research. The type of lawn being studied, whether it's a sports field, a residential lawn, or a park, can significantly impact the results and how those results can be applied.
So while it's encouraging to see more research on fertilizer application, there's still, lots of room for improvement in terms of provide more context and details.
For sure.
Let's move beyond irrigation and fertilizer for a moment. The paper had a category for other applications. What kinds of things fell under that umbrella?
That category was really a mix of diverse research interests. It encompassed things like weed detection monitoring for biotic and abiotic stress factors,
Okay.
things like diseases, pests, temperature fluctuations, and the effects of herbicides, even included some early explorations into turfgrass establishment and phenotyping.
Phenotyping, what is that?
Phenotyping is essentially the study of plant traits.
Okay.
Things like leaf texture, growth patterns, color variations, and even root structure.
Okay.
It helps researchers understand the unique characteristics of different grass varieties and how they respond to various environmental conditions.
So it's like creating a detailed profile for each type of grass, understanding its strengths and weaknesses and how to best care for it.
Exactly, and that's where drones are proving to be incredibly valuable tools. They're capturing these high-resolution images and multispectral data, which helps researchers identify those subtle variations that might not be visible to the naked eye.
Okay, so they're giving researchers this kind of magnifying glass to zoom in on that world of turf grass.
Precise.
But even in this other category, I'm guessing DJI drones and multispectral cameras were still the stars of the show.
You are absolutely right. DJI drones were the dominant force appearing in the majority of the studies, but there was a bit more variety this time with models like the Phantom 4 Inspire 1 FC350 Matrix, 200 V2 Matrix 210 Mavic 2 Pro, and even the Bebop Pro thermal making appearances.
Wow, so a wider range of tools being employed, but still that clear preference for those reliable DJI drones and the insights offered by multispectral camera.
Yeah. What about the turf grass being studied in these other applications? Anything surprising there?
Well, the trend of single-species lawns dominating research continued here. They represented about 72% of the studies. Cynodon and Zoysia were the most commonly studied genera, followed by Paspalum, Stenotaphyrum, and Agrostis.
Okay, so it seems like those tough, adaptable grasses are really getting the most attention in this field.
They are.
But were mixed species lawns totally ignored in this category?
Not entirely. They made up about 18% of the studies, with Festuca being a frequently used genus in those mixed species experiments.
Okay, so at least they got some attention.
They did.
But I have a sneaking suspicion that there were quite a few studies that didn't bother to specify what type of grass they were using. Am I right?
Unfortunately, you were almost 10% of the studies in this category left out that crucial information.
Oh, man.
It adds to that frustrating trend of data gaps we've been encountering. It's a reminder that even in cutting-edge research, there's always room for improvement in terms of providing context and detailed information. Right, because that context is really what you need to actually apply the findings.
Exactly.
It's a good thing we're doing this deep dive, because it's clear that while these drones are offering incredible potential, there are still so many unanswered questions and areas that need further exploration.
Yeah, there's a lot more to learn.
The paper itself actually acknowledged some of the key challenges and future trends that need to be addressed. What were some of the highlights in that area?
Well, one of the most pressing challenges is the limited scope of current research, as we've seen throughout our discussion. Most of the studies are concentrated in the USA with a heavy focus on sports lawns.
Yeah, so we're getting this very, U.S.-centric, sports-focused view of drone-based turf grass management.
Right, and that might not be applicable to other regions or types of lawns.
Exactly. It makes it really hard to generalize the findings and develop those best practices that can be applied globally.
Absolutely. We need more diverse research that takes into account different geographical locations, climates, soil types, and of course the full spectrum of turf grass species, including those mixed species lawns.
Right. It's like trying to understand global cuisine by only sampling dishes from one country.
That's a great analogy.
To really appreciate the diversity and complexity of turf grass management, we need to expand our horizons a little bit.
We do, and that includes moving beyond those controlled single-species test plots and venturing out into the real world.
Right, bridging the gap between the lab and the lawn.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing research scope isn't the only challenge facing this field. What other limitations did the paper point out?
Another major challenge is data accuracy, which is often hampered by the limited frequency of drone flights in many studies.
We've touched on this before, but it's worth repeating.
It is.
If you're only checking on the turf grass once a month, you're going to miss a lot of information, especially when you're dealing with something like hydric stress, which can change so rapidly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to monitor the stock market by only checking prices once a week. You're going to miss a lot.
Yeah, you're going to miss out on those trends.
To get an accurate picture, we need more frequent flights, especially during those critical periods.
Right, but more frequent flights also means, more cost.
It does.
And I imagine that that's a big barrier for a lot of people, especially smaller lawn care operations or even homeowners.
You're absolutely right. Cost and accessibility are major barriers to wider adoption.
Yeah.
While the price of drones and sensors has come down in recent years, it's still a hurdle for many.
Right. It highlights the need for more affordable, user-friendly options.
Absolutely.
But let's shift our focus to the future. What are some of those exciting trends that the paper identified?
One of the most promising trends is the increasing integration of ground-based sensors,
Okay.
which can provide that valuable real-time data
Yeah.
that can really complement the drone-based monitoring.
It's like having a team of experts working together.
Exactly.
You've got the drones with that aerial perspective.
Yeah. Right.
And the ground-based sensors offering those, up-close, real-time insights.
That synergy can paint a much more comprehensive picture of turfgrass health.
Right, and lead to more targeted and efficient drone flights, which means better data and, less cost.
Exactly, a win-win situation.
What other trends are on the horizon?
Another exciting development is the emergence of multifunctional drones that can collect a wider range of data beyond just images.
Oh,
Imagine drones equipped with sensors to measure air quality, soil moisture, temperature, light levels, even nutrient levels in the grass itself.
wow. So it's like turning those drones into these flying environmental labs.
Precisely gathering this really rich data set that can provide a much more holistic understanding of turfgrass health.
Right. So we're moving from like a two-dimensional view of the lawn to this multi-layered, three-dimensional understanding of the whole ecosystem.
That's a great way to put it.
But we can't talk about the future of this field without addressing the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence. It seems like AI is poised to revolutionize every industry, and I'm guessing turfgrass management is no exception.
You are absolutely right. AI is a game changer in this field.
Okay.
It has the potential to automate so many aspects of drone-based turfgrass management,
Wow.
from planning those flight paths to analyzing data, even making decisions about things like irrigation fertilization and pest control.
So we're talking about autonomous drones, like making decisions about our lawns.
It's a fascinating blend of excitement and apprehension.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But think about the possibilities. Drones that can analyze real-time data and then adjust irrigation systems, apply fertilizer treatments, or even deploy beneficial insects to combat pests.
It's like having this robotic lawn care expert at your disposal,
Exactly.
constantly monitoring and adjusting to keep everything in tip-top shape. But I have to wonder, what about the human element in all of this?
That's a question that comes up a lot, and I think it's important to remember that AI is a tool.
Okay.
It's not a replacement for human knowledge and expertise.
Right, so it's not about robots taking over. It's about humans and robots kind of working together.
Exactly, leveraging the strengths of both
Yeah.
to achieve optimal results.
So AI can handle those, repetitive, data-intensive tasks and free up humans to do that more strategic decision-making
Precisely.
based on, their experience and understanding.
It's like having a superpowered assistant to help you manage your turf grass,
Okay.
taking care of those routine tasks so you can focus on the bigger picture.
As AI becomes more sophisticated, where do you see this field heading in the future?
Well, it really is mind-boggling to think about, how this technology might evolve. It's like we're just at the very beginning of this whole new era of lawn care.
Yeah, but before we get, too far ahead of ourselves, I want to circle back to something the paper mentioned about, additional information sources.
Right.
It sounds like drones weren't the only tools they were using to kind of get a handle on, what was going on with the turf grass.
You're right. Many of the researchers went beyond just the drones and cameras to gather a more complete picture.
Okay.
They incorporated data from soil monitoring devices and turf grass monitoring devices.
Okay, so it's about understanding what's happening above and below the ground.
Exactly. For soil monitoring, the most common parameter they looked at was soil moisture.
Okay, that makes sense, especially when you're thinking about hydric stress and, making sure the irrigation is working properly.
You need to know how much water is actually reaching those roots,
Right.
not just how much you're putting out there with the sprinklers.
So how were they measuring that soil moisture?
They used a variety of tools.
Okay.
Soil moisture sensors are pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
They directly measure the moisture level.
Right.
Tensiometers measure how tightly that water is being held by the soil,
Okay.
which tells you how available it is to the plants. And they even use something called time domain reflectometry.
Wow. That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's basically a way to measure how much water is in the soil by analyzing its electrical properties.
Okay, so all different ways of gauging how thirsty the soil is. Yeah. But what about the turf grass itself? How are they monitoring that, apart from the drones?
Well, that's where those turf grass monitoring devices come in.
Okay.
And they were used to assess all sorts of aspects of the grass. Things like its color, how dense it is, the height of the blades, even the chlorophyll content.
Wow. So it's like giving the grass a full physical...
Exactly, a full checkup.
So with all this data coming in from different sources, how do they make sense of it all?
Well, one of the most commonly used metrics is the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI for short.
NDVI. Okay, I think I've heard of that. I think I've seen that on, those maps that show plant health from satellites.
You're exactly right. It's
Yep.
a widely used indicator of plant health, and it's calculated from the different wavelengths of light reflected by vegetation.
Okay.
Essentially, a healthy plant will reflect more near-infrared light and less visible light,
Okay.
while a stressed or unhealthy plant will show the opposite pattern, and that difference is used to calculate the NDVI value, with higher values indicating healthier vegetation.
So it's a quick way to get a sense of how happy the plants are based on how they reflect light.
Exactly. And the great thing about NDVI is that it can be measured using all sorts of different tools,
Mm.
including handheld sensors, ground-based spectrometers, and of course those multispectral cameras on the drones.
Right, so multiple perspectives on the same problem,
Exactly.
which leads to a better understanding.
It does.
But
Yeah.
with all this talk about, technology and data, let's step back for a second. Why should we even care about this?
Right.
What's the so what of all this research?
That's a great question. And I think there are several reasons to be excited about this technology and what it can do for our green spaces.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, first and foremost, it has the potential to really improve the efficiency and sustainability of turf grass management.
Okay.
We talked about how drones can help pinpoint those areas that need attention, whether it's water fertilizer or pest control.
Right.
And that targeted approach can lead to significant reductions in water and chemical usage.
Which is good for the environment and our wallets.
Exactly a win-win for the planet and our bank accounts.
What else?
Another major benefit is that this technology can lead to healthier, more resilient turf grass.
Okay.
By detecting those signs of stress disease or nutrient deficiencies early on, you can take action before they become major problems.
So it's like a preventative healthcare plan for your lawn,
That's a perfect analogy.
catching those warning signs and taking care of things right away.
Exactly, and it's not just about aesthetics either.
Okay.
Healthier turf grass can actually contribute to a healthier environment overall.
Right. Because if the grass is struggling, then you're more likely to use those chemical solutions.
Exactly. Things like pesticides and herbicides, which can have a negative impact on human health.
Especially for kids and pets.
Exactly. So it's not just about having a beautiful lawn, it's about creating a safer, healthier environment for everyone.
And beyond those benefits, there's that potential for even more discoveries and innovations as this technology keeps evolving.
Absolutely. We're just at the beginning of what's possible.
Yeah, it feels like we're moving away from those one-size-fits-all solutions toward this more personalized, data-driven approach
I agree.
that takes into account, the needs of each specific lawn.
I think that's a great way to summarize it.
Before we wrap up, what's one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important takeaway is that this technology is not just about collecting data. It's about using that data to make informed decisions and take action.
Right.
Drones and sensors are powerful tools, but they're only as effective as the people who use them. And we need to think carefully about the data we're collecting and be willing to experiment and innovate to unlock the full potential of this technology.
Right. It's a call to action for all of us, whether we're, professionals or just homeowners who want a healthy lawn. We can all play a part.
We can, and with these advancements, that future looks really bright.
Well said. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring all the latest research on using drones for turfgrass management, the challenges, the possibilities, even some DIY tips along the way.
You did.
So thanks for joining us, and happy turfgrass managing.